Hey everyone, Genome here with the next episode of Was It Good? Today we're going to take a journey back to 1983 to the beginning of, what I would say, a pop culture phenomenon, the one that's still talked about today. That phenomenon was called The Joy of Painting, hosted by none other than Bob Ross. I think we all know who Bob Ross is at this point, but if you're not enlightened enough, he was the guy with the big perm who did the oil painting on PBS on the half-hour segments. So basically he would start with a blank canvas at the beginning of the show, and by the end you had yourself a beautiful landscape. So today we'll talk a little bit about the show and quite a bit more about the man himself. And toward the end, we'll lay out whether I thought the actual show was good or not. Does it still hold up? So a little about the show itself. The show began in 1983 and ran all the way through 1994, hosted by Bob Ross the whole time, airing on PBS. Unfortunately, Mr. Ross died in 1995, so we couldn't get anything further from him. But there were some offshoots from the show that were made possible due to the viewership that he had. So, kind of interesting story about Mr. Ross is that he was actually born in Central Florida, around the same area where I was raised. He was born in Daytona Beach, Florida, and then he was mostly raised in Orlando, Florida. So I spent a good portion of my young life in Orlando. So there's that little tie in between us, I guess. I didn't know that when I went in, though, to this little episode. Believe it or not, for such a mild-mannered guy, at least on TV and by all accounts in his regular life as well, he actually spent 20 years in the military. He spent 20 years in the Air Force and wound up achieving the rank of Master Sergeant. So yeah, pretty high ranking guy as far as enlisted goes, and you never would guess it from the show, you know. He spent most of his time in service stationed in Alaska. And fun fact is a lot of the landscape portraits that he did were kind of inspired from his time being out there in the rugged Alaskan, how shall we say it, outdoors. One of the things he said later on is the fact that he had to be so stern and, you know, by the book in the military because of his rank, that he kind of wanted to become the opposite when it came to his show. So he didn't have to be in charge, in your face, all that. He could take a very soft, easy approach with the people. So he enjoyed that factor about his show. Bob used what was called the wet-on-wet technique in his show, basically applying paints to already applied paints that weren't completely dry. You'll have to forgive my terminology. I don't know a whole lot about painting because, once again, I'm artistically challenged when it comes to the visual arts. So he also makes sure to keep his sets real minimal. And if you notice, there's not much else there to see but him and the canvas, and sometimes you'll see his implements of creation down there below him. But very simple. He kept it like that for a reason. He always kept in mind budget constraints when it came to paintings that he had on his show. So basically, he was trying to get people who wanted to paint these portraits along with him to be able to do so on the cheap, you know, so it wouldn't cost you an arm and a leg to go out and do this. So that was a real nice touch he had in his shows. So, you know, the everyday person could go out there, you know, save up a little lunch money and buy themselves a canvas and then, you know, set to creating for just a few dollars, you know. So it wasn't the lifestyles of the rich and famous, which I might do a show on that later. It was really budget oriented. I have an interesting little name for this guy that I made up. I call him Human Prozac because the man is just mellow. He exudes positivity. He is the answer to stress and hecticness in the everyday world that sadly is pretty much gone nowadays. His style would probably be too slow and kind of like Mr. Rogers, same thing. Taste changed, attention spans got shorter, and people like more in-your-face artistry, and whatever the heck that means. Another sort of fun fact about Bob Ross was his haircut. So, from all his years in the military and just his personal preference, he actually kept a crew cut. But during the time of getting his show started, you know, money was tight and it was getting too expensive to get his hair cut all the time. So he had it done in a permanent, which was all the rage in the 80s. And it was so popular with the fans that he kept it, even after he got more successful and, you know, haircut money wasn't exactly a big deal. Legend has it that he got kind of uncomfortable having that haircut the same for all the time that he had it. But once again, that's what his public and crowd wanted, so he kept it on for appearance's sake. He had some fairly iconic phrases that he used on a regular basis that most of you all probably know pretty well from either internet memes or just friends or maybe even watching the show. Happy little trees. When he would clean his brush off, he'd say beat the devil out of it, you know, but always in a lighthearted manner, you know. Some other interesting things about him was he built up a multi-million-dollar business because of that show. It really wasn't a money-making operation for him to do the show, but offshoots of that actually allowed him to amass quite a bit of wealth. He started up Bob Ross Inc., which sold art supplies and how-to books. And you can imagine that the, I would say, you know, worldwide fame that PBS afforded him gave him a pretty big consumer base. So I believe that company wound up being worth around $15 million at the time of his death. Also note, with tie-in with the TV show, that every painting he did on show, he actually donated to PBS or one of its affiliates, which was kind of a nice gesture on his part. And that wound up being a lot of paintings. So a lot of people don't know that he actually did 3 paintings for each show that he did, all the same. So the first one he would do would be off screen at a frame, so a reference picture for him, so he didn't have to go completely from memory as he's doing it there on screen with you for the second one. The second one was the live on-air one that he would do, and that usually was the least detailed of all of them. And then finally there'd be a third one which he would paint after the fact, and that one he would make very detailed, because those would tend to go into his how-to books later on down the line. And that was an interesting facet of his show, and it shows how much time he had to put into each and every episode. It wasn't just him walking on to set and painting from, you know, what was up here, the picture in his mind. He actually had a lot of prep work go into it. So getting down to, was it actually good? Well, you know, the Joy of Painting has become pretty synonymous with pop culture from the 80s, and you see Mr. Ross's likeness everywhere out there, still to this day, usually in a lighthearted manner. Let's just put it this way. How could anyone not love Bob Ross in the show Joy of Painting? I always liken it to, you know, there's nothing like coming home from a hard day's work, putting an episode of Joy of Painting on, and just putting all the stress and all of the nonsense of the day behind you, and just listening to his very soft and peaceful voice, and watching beautiful creations, you know, popping up right before your eyes from blank canvas. So yeah, I mean, the show was great. It still holds up today too, which is kind of surprising considering, you know, it probably didn't have much of a budget to shoot with, and it was just kept so minimalistic. But you know, painting is painting. So a show like that will tend to hold up a lot better than, say, maybe a sci-fi show or a show that's more grounded in current pop culture. You know, painting just, it goes beyond the ages. So yeah, Joy of Painting was great. Mr. Ross was a true icon for all those out there, not just for artists, because I can't draw at all, but you know, I'll still watch it from time to time. And the great thing is, most of, if not all of his episodes are now available on Netflix to watch. Check out Bob Ross Beauties Everywhere on Netflix, and you'll be able to tune in and see, you know, just what a great show this was, and sit back and enjoy the peace and harmony that he brings into every happy little cloud that he makes. Well, that's it for now. Oh, I also want to throw out a little shout out to the person who gave me the idea for this video. Her name is now changed, but I always remember her as Rod from Iraq. So Rod, out there, wherever you are, thanks again for commenting and leaving me a great idea for a video segment, and hopefully I did it justice for you. So until next time, please stay tuned for the next episode of Was It Good?, which should be out in a few days' time. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please put them right down there in the comments. If you want to call me a genius, you want to call me an idiot, put that down there too. I just like activities. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be bringing you more content shortly. Until then, pick up your paintbrush, get out there, and paint you a happy little tree. All right, this is Genome, out.